All right, so let's go ahead and talk about supplementation. We talked a lot about pastures and range this morning. We're going to move on into, so what do we do with those cows that we still have? And you're going to hear me still talk about culling too. If you were all listening to Dr. Martin, you heard a lot about culling. That's a big part of the supplementation. You'll see what I mean in just a minute. Okay, so you've heard this already. Your options during drought, there's a number of them. You can buy some more feed. You can sell some animals. You can do something about water. We didn't talk much about this, but there are a number of people having to move or take drinking water to animals where they're at, or you can't put them somewhere because you don't have water. So that's another consideration that you have to worry about. And we haven't really talked much about this, but this is an option for those that have it. You know, take the cows to the feed. Don't bring the feed to the cows. It actually costs less to take a 1,500-pound cow to some feed than bring 2 or 3 tons of feed to the cow, right? Okay, so that's another thing need to be thinking about. But how do we decide what do we want to do? We want to keep the ranch in the family for a while. That's usually a major consideration. The long-term ranch survival or income is really one of the big drivers, or should be one of the big drivers, or that's what we hear all the time. I think that is important here. We want to save the forage base. We heard about that this morning. We haven't talked much about this, but saving the best genetics, usually the younger animals, but that's a major consideration in what we want to do. And income tax consequences, which you're going to hear more later on this afternoon, as well as some insurance sort of things. Okay. I do a lot of computer modeling in what I do, and so I decided I wouldn't show any equations, and I wouldn't show any computer models today, but I have to show the results of one of them. This slide really points out clearly where we're at. Normal year, we have a high large number of cows. We have a good high net income, or that's what we'd like to be. When we have drought, we have to do something. We can either feed cows and keep the same number of cows. In other words, we don't cull. Or we can cull the animals severely so we don't have to do any feeding. The problem is that you all really realize the optimum is what we're going to do is somewhere in between. And if we look at net income and do the simulations, you find that there actually is an optimum there. So you want to do some of both. Okay, and most people, and depending on what your situation is, it depends how much closer you are to feeding or how much closer you are to culling nearly all the animals. So what I'm going to try to do today is talk about where are you going to be on that line? Where are you going to be in that mix between feeding and culling? Because if you do all or one or the other, I don't think you need me to be talking to you today. Okay? Okay. So, I'm going to base this a lot on some research that's been done here. We have, in fact, I actually printed them out last night and read through them or looked through them again. 3 papers that we did in the 90s on culling, on strategic supplementation. How do we supplement cows to get optimum production? And so we had an 8-year study. Interestingly, it did include a year of drought. That was very important. In fact, I was on sabbatical in Australia at that time, and Mike Connor called me up and said, "We got to do something, Jim. The cows are getting really thin. We're in danger of drought." And I was very happy. I was in Australia. They were having a wonderful year. And so I said, okay, we got to buy some hay. So we'll buy some hay. It wasn't near as bad as it is this year, okay? But that was a problem. So we did do that. So we did have some drought data in here. We had 2 stocking rates. The trial was a very simple trial, 3x2. We had 2 treatments for our stocking rate. We left the cows on the pasture until the residual dry matter was either about 1,000 pounds or about 750 pounds, or a little less. And it varied over 8 years, you might imagine. It varied a little bit, okay? But the point was we heavily stocked some of the cows, and the other set of cows were moderately stocked, okay? And we had 3 supplementation treatments. During the time of year, basically from late summer until basically the grass was coming on good in February, we had one group, we had a plus there. that we always supplemented during that time, whether it's protein supplementation until the grass got short and then some hay, or we had another group that they just had to tough it out. We never supplemented them. We didn't feel sorry for them. They were stuck without ever being seen a bale of hay or a protein supplement. We also had another group we called strategic. And the strategic cows, we went through and did body condition scoring on the 1 to 9 scale every 3 months. And those animals that were not a body condition score of a 5 or above were put in a supplemented group. So they went in and ran with the plus group for the next 3 months, and those that weren't ran with the negative group. So we only had 2 groups of cows, 2 physical groups of cows at any one time, but the cows that were on the strategic supplementation group got moved around based on their body condition score. So let's see what that means. Okay, here's the results over 8 years of the pregnancy rates for these different supplementation groups that are broken out by the medium or the heavy stocking rate. Okay, if we look at the medium stocking rate, even never supplementing, those cows still had pregnancy rates. This is the percent of cows that were pregnant as opposed to with a denominator of cows that were exposed to the bull. They bred up just fine, and we were about between 83 and 85% pregnancy rate. Stocking rate, as long as there's enough grass out there, those cows can go out and find something green or something good, keep going, okay? Heavy stocking rate, we see quite a different picture though. The heavy stocking rate are the red bars. Look what happened when we didn't supplement those animals that were heavily stocked. And realize in a drought year, we would be much worse off than this even, okay? So we had at least a 20% drop in pregnancy rate averaged over all those 8 years for those non-supplemented cows. If we supplemented those animals that were thin, we brought that pregnancy rate basically nearly up to where the other animals were. So what's this trying to tell us? Well, it's trying to tell us something, I think, that's very simple, that when you have a drought or you have really heavy stocking rates, tough times, you got to supplement. So that's one of the punchlines I want you to remember today. If you're going to do it, it's all or none. If you're going to supplement a cow, you supplement them to get them up to that good condition score to get them going. You don't limp them along. A little bit like they talked about this morning. You don't put 50% of the water on all the pasture. You save 50% of the pasture, put 100% of the water on 50% of the pasture. Same way here with the cows. You want to supplement those. If you're going to supplement, give them plenty. Get them going. Get them back up to that level that they're going to be okay. Because in a drought, we're even worse than this. We'd be way more than 20-30% decrease in pregnancy rate. And I'll talk a little bit about more of that as we go along. Interestingly, though, supplementing these animals that were thin is getting them back up to good condition score, and they would rebreed. Okay, looking at it from another angle, if we looked at the body condition score at breeding and pregnancy rate, and this is averaged over all the cows and all the studies, we see a really major effect of body condition score on subsequent pregnancy rate. So this was at the beginning of breeding season. We also looked at body condition score at other times during the year, but by far in a fall calving foothill situation, the most important body condition score that you could take related to pregnancy or subsequent pregnancy rate is at breeding, when the bulls turned in. Okay? And if you look at this, as long as those cows were above 4, and for sure 4.5, 5, they went ahead and rebred, but you see steep decline. I mean, we're down here for some cows in 3s of basically around half or 50% pregnancy rate, 60%. Okay? Big effect of body condition score. Interestingly, body condition score also is affected by age. I know Dr. Martin talked about teeth being a problem with the older cows, some other physiological factors. that's reflected in their how well they can keep themselves. And if you look at the data points are actually shown in by the little rectangles or diamonds, but the best fit line is through that. Notice how the line really drops off when you get above 8 years old. And that's at least with the kind of cattle we had here, fairly all English bred, English breed cattle. And they just couldn't maintain their body condition score once they got fairly old. And that would be reflected, I think you'll see in this next slide, by pregnancy rate. And so pregnancy rate, once those animals are above 8, 9, it's just hard to keep them pregnant. And we really, by the time they were 10-year-olds, they were way down in the 60% range or so. So a real concern at that point. Not only pregnancy rate, but even for those that did have calves and weaned a calf, the weaning weights were decreased in the order of maybe 30, 40 or more pounds for those really old cows. And in fact, if you look at the trend, once you got above 5 or 6, you really started seeing a decline in weaning weights. Okay. That was a little surprising. I thought the 7 or 8 year old cow would be just as good as the 4 or 5, but it seems to be a decline there as well. So just some other things that age is important. In a drought situation, which cows are going to be the ones that you should be most concerned about? It's obviously those older cows. Okay, so to take up the last few minutes here, some conclusions. You're all or none. I mean, if you're going to be supplementing, if you're going to keep the cows and you have drought, you supplement. You have to do something. Not supplementing is not an option. And at least you're going to have to supplement those thinner cows. Get the body condition score up. If the body condition score of those cows are 5, those are the ones you don't have to worry about. The other ones are, if you're going to have them around, particularly the younger ones. And I didn't say much about this, but both the older and the younger cows have more difficulty maintaining condition scores, so those younger ones are probably the ones that are going to need the supplementation for sure. Pregnancy rate decreases in older cows. Weaning weights decrease with cows that are older too. And I think you're hearing this all day long here. Call the older cows, feed younger, and the thinner ones that you do need to keep. I mean, we have a computer program called TARS that you can go through and formulate rations for these animals. The point is you want to do just like I think Josh Davies showed earlier. Use your NRC, use your advisors, use the book values. They're good enough to help you analyze and determine what you need to supplement. We showed a bunch of supplemental feeds out here. You don't want to limp them along. You supplement those to meet their requirements. And those other cows, it's time to say goodbye to. So, thank you.
We have time for questions for Jim while we swap out slides.
Jim, what did you supplement with?
The question is, what did we supplement with? And the supplementation was actually pretty straightforward. We originally just supplemented with alfalfa hay because that fit both the protein and the energy requirements. But as we went on with the trial, we realized that protein supplementation was really all you needed when you had adequate forage. And so when you have adequate forage, you use protein supplementation. When you didn't, you had to find some hay. That drought year, we fed mainly hay.